How far would you be willing to go for a win? When I planned to get a job as a nanny in the Montenegro household, I had only one goal in mind: to seduce my boss's attractive husband. Yes, I know. It sounds calculating, daring, and terrible, but give me a chance to explain how my own game ended up turning against me, and how I went from being a fierce hunter to becoming the prey of my own feelings. My name is Anna, I'm 25 years old, and it all began when I saw Daniel Montenegro in a local business magazine. His penetrating gaze, elegant bearing, and that air of power captivated me instantly. I investigated everything about him. He was a successful businessman, married to Victoria, a workaholic executive, and father of a 5-year-old girl. When I saw they were looking for a nanny, I didn't hesitate. I presented myself at the interview with my best weapon, a formal outfit, but strategically fitted. From the moment I crossed the threshold of that mansion in the most exclusive suburbs of the city, I knew I hadn't made a mistake. My heels resonated on the polished marble as I admired the windows that rose from floor to ceiling, letting in the evening light that bathed everything in gold. The exquisite decoration, a mix of modern art and carefully selected antiques, spoke of refined taste and abundant resources. Daniel Montenegro greeted me with an expression that confirmed my choice of outfit had been correct. He was tall, with dark hair with some premature grays that made him look irresistibly mature, and emerald green eyes that lingered a second longer than necessary on my figure. His wife, Victoria, a high-level executive who traveled constantly, was barely present at the interview. Clad in her designer suit and with her Louis Vuitton briefcase, she gave me a quick glance before heading to the airport. Her heels marked a hurried rhythm as if every second was a business opportunity she couldn't waste. "Welcome to our home," Daniel said with a deep voice that made me shiver. "Sophia, our 5-year-old daughter, is waiting for you upstairs. Victoria trusts my judgment to hire you." My plan began immediately. The first month, I dedicated myself to establishing my image as the perfect nanny, sweet with Sophia, efficient in my tasks, and respectful but always with a subtle touch of flirtation. I studied every detail of the family routine, memorized the preferences of each family member, and made sure to always be one step ahead of their needs. I began to wear the traditional nanny uniform but with small modifications. The skirt a centimeter shorter each week, the top button strategically unbuttoned, the stockings a bit more transparent than conventional. The first few days I focused on Sophia, an adorable girl but in need of attention. Her big brown eyes always sought approval, and her constant questions about when Mom would return made me feel a pang of guilt that I tried to ignore. The little one found in me the constant company she so longed for, and soon became my shadow, following me around the house while telling me her childish stories and sharing her most precious secrets. Victoria was always busy with her meetings and business trips, while Daniel worked from home in his office, an elegant space full of old books and the aroma of leather and freshly brewed coffee. My next step was to create seemingly innocent situations. I made sure to be bending over tidying Sophia's toys when he passed through the hallway, or reaching for glasses from the highest shelf in the kitchen when I knew he would come in for his coffee. Every movement was calculated, every gesture rehearsed in front of the mirror. I noticed his furtive glances, how his eyes followed the movement of my hips when I walked, how his breathing became slightly choppy when I leaned over his desk to leave him his afternoon coffee. One particularly hot morning, while Victoria was in Tokyo closing an important business deal, I decided to take the next step. I offered to wash his car, knowing he would be working in his office overlooking the garden. I put on a white sports outfit that became suggestive when wet, and made sure I was visible from his window. The midday sun made the water droplets on my skin shine, and the summer breeze played with my hair as I concentrated on my task, aware of the gaze I felt from the office window. When I finished, soaked and satisfied, I could see that he had stopped pretending to work. Victoria's absences became my best ally. London, Singapore, New York, each trip was an opportunity. Her nightly calls became shorter and shorter, always interrupted by some work emergency or time difference. I began to accidentally fall asleep on the living room sofa with a book, wearing short shorts and a loose t-shirt, or to appear freshly out of the shower wrapped in a towel, pretending surprise when I encountered him in the hallway. The air was charged with electricity in each casual encounter, and I could feel how his resistance weakened day by day. The tension was palpable. His looks became more intense, his accidental brushes more frequent. During dinners, when Sophia was already asleep, our conversations became more personal. We talked about literature, art, life, and each hour was charged with an erotic subtext that we both pretended to ignore. He told me about his frustrated dreams of being a writer, and I shared my own artistic aspirations, creating an intimacy that went beyond the physical. One stormy night, while Sophia slept soundly after an exhausting day at the park, I executed the boldest part of my plan. I headed to the library where I knew he would be working. The lightning intermittently illuminated the room through the large windows, creating an almost cinematic atmosphere. I was wearing a silk dress that I had carefully chosen, one that suggested more than it showed. The thunder that rumbled was my perfect excuse to jump and approach him. "Are you all right, Anna?" His hands on my shoulders sent electric currents throughout my body. The scent of his cologne enveloped me, mixing with the smell of old books and polished wood. The storm roared outside, but inside the library, the only sound was that of our agitated breathing. "Yes, Our gazes met, and time seemed to stop. His lips were so close that I could feel his choppy breath. It was then that he kissed me for the first time, and something unexpected happened. My heart skipped a beat that wasn't in a plan. What followed was a whirlwind of secret encounters that ceased to be part of my strategy to become a necessity. Discreet notes slipped between the pages of books, touches that sent shivers down my spine, late-night conversations that extended until dawn. The guilt that at first didn't exist began to grow along with my true feelings. It was no longer just the game of seduction, but something deeper and dangerous. I was falling in love. One afternoon, while preparing Sophia's snack, peanut butter sandwiches and apple juice, Daniel entered the kitchen. The afternoon sun drew golden shadows on his face when, without a word, he cornered me against the marble countertop. His closeness made me dizzy, and for the first time, I felt afraid of my own feelings. "I can't keep pretending I don't feel anything," he whispered, and for the first time, I felt vulnerable. My plan had worked too well, but now it was I who was trapped in my own snare. Guilt consumed me every time Victoria returned from her trips. It was no longer the confidence of a seductress that I felt, but the weight of having played with fire and gotten burned. Every gift she gave me, French perfumes, Swiss chocolates, was a reminder of my betrayal, not only to her but to myself. Sophia, with her innocence, had become my harshest judge without knowing it. Her spontaneous hugs and blind trust made me feel like the most despicable being in the world. Fate has an ironic way of collecting on our actions. One afternoon, while we were sharing an intimate moment in his office, his sister Elena discovered us. The horror on her face was indescribable. "How could you, Daniel? Victoria trusts you. Trusts both of you." Her words resonated off the walls like an accusing echo. And I knew that the house of cards I had built was about to collapse. The scandal was inevitable. Sophia began to ask innocent questions that stabbed my heart like daggers. The child I had used as an excuse for my seduction game now made me question all my morality. Things got worse when Victoria began to suspect. Her trips shortened. She began to return without notice, to ask uncomfortable questions. The hunter had become the prey of her own trap. One night, after a passionate encounter in the greenhouse where the orchids were silent witnesses to what I could no longer simply call a game of seduction, I made a decision. The reflection of the moon in the glass showed me what I had become, and I didn't like what I saw. The calculating and confident woman had transformed into someone vulnerable and scared, trapped in a web of lies and real feelings. The day I left, it was raining like that night in the library. Daniel found me packing my few belongings, each object a reminder of my time in that house that had become the stage of my own fall. "You don't have to do this," he pleaded, and this time the pain in his voice was real. We both know I do, I replied, fighting against tears that for the first time were genuine. Your family needs you more than we need each other. 2 weeks later, I found out that Victoria had found one of our messages. Surprisingly, they decided to go to couples therapy. Sophia started smiling again, and me? Well, I learned that playing with others' feelings is like playing with fire. Sooner or later, you end up getting burned. And you know what? I confess with a bitter smile that every time I see a nanny uniform, I remember how my perfect plan became my own trap. Because sometimes, when you play at being the seductress, you end up being seduced by your own feelings. Did the twists and secrets of today catch you? Imagine what's coming. Give it a like if it left you wanting more, and subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming stories. Keep browsing our channel to discover the drama and passion that await you.